Yeah, and it's so important too to realize that when you're sentenced to life, I mean, you're in there for a very long time. And guess by the time you're 60, you're 70, you can't do crimes anymore. Especially, I mean, if you were put in for a violent crime, you're probably like not that violent anymore. Or in this, in cases where it's three burglaries, you're probably addicted to drugs and trying to serve that addiction. Guess what? You've been in for 40 years now, even 20, 25 years, and you're over that stuff and you're not going to hurt anybody?
Well, we know that people do age out of crime. Some people age out at 30 years, some at 40 years, some at 50. Certainly by 60 or 70, people have aged out of crime. The challenge is that our system in the past has been punitive. And even though, I've been involved in criminal justice work since the 1980s, really, and really early 90s. I sued CDCR, my first case in 1991. And somewhere along the way, they changed the name to the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. And so the focus shifted, allegedly, to rehabilitation, which meant that keeping people incarcerated on principle for 40, 50 years, unless they are a real danger to public safety, was not something that the taxpayers and the residents and the voting public of California wanted anymore. So the shift, when you add in and rehabilitation to the title of your agency, the presumption is at some point you are working to rehabilitate people even if they have a life sentence, because then the legislature changed the law so that you have the youthful offender laws now that make people eligible for parole. And you have the elder offender laws that make elders eligible for parole. Now, everybody, this is the other misnomer, people who are eligible for parole that have a life sentence normally don't get parole. The data shows that less than 15% of the people who go to the parole board with a life sentence actually get parole the first time. That means 85% of the people who do actually get to go to parole, they're not going to get out. And then they got to wait 3 to 5 years before they can go back. And depending on the facts of the case and the crime and their conduct while they've been incarcerated over, 20, 30 years, they're not going to get out. And that's just the reality of it that is not reflected in any of the conversations when we're talking about charging or sentencing
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
or resentencing.
What's so crazy to me is like again, like I say, this is just so enlightening to me. You were just simply following the law.
Exactly.
The law changed, and the law actually said it's now rehabilitation. The law changed, and it's now about like making considerations for youth and seniors. And you were just simply following the law. So
Absolutely.
basically, what happened was that people were taking advantage of the fact that people didn't understand the law.
Exactly. People did not know anything about enhancements. They don't know anything about the parole board or the youthful offender laws or the elder laws. People don't understand the black box of justice. And so we started when I ran for this seat as the first person to run since 1972. That was an education process of first convincing our community that the district attorney is an elected official, right? People didn't even know it was an elected official. They certainly didn't know what the DA did. So we had to educate people. This is what a DA does. This is why the reason why you don't see them on your ballot and you've never voted for a DA is because nobody's ever run for this seat. The whole time I was in California, I came here in 1978. I never voted for a DA, right?
Right.
Most people, my generation and older and younger, they never voted for a DA because no one ever ran. So our first task was to educate people about the role of the DA. But there was so much ignorance about the law when I came into office in 2023 and how the laws had changed and what our mandates were, that yes, people were able to be hoodwinked about what we were doing as if we were doing something extraordinary. one of the recent laws that people will find out about. The legislature has passed a law. It is required that victims be given the option of restorative justice. That's the law.
Yeah.
And our community doesn't know that, and they're not ready for that, and they've been made to think restorative justice is a bad thing. Well, guess what? It's the law, people.
Yeah.
Wow. And so how did they turn restorative justice into a bugaboo? How did they turn it into this thing where people were like, well, I guess they did it with DEI too, I guess. So
Yeah. It's narrative, everything. It's media, it's misinformation. It's attacking people based on, their political ideology, but making it into something else. I mean, one of the things, I am an elected Democratic member of the Democratic Party. And one of the things that we know is that the Democratic Party is doing a terrible job of communicating what we believe and what we stand for. Wow. Whereas, and it's both that we've done a terrible job, and the folks that are reactionary MAGA folks that want to take us back to the 1940s and 50s, they've done a great job. And I mean, I recall when the Heritage Foundation and all of these extra think tanks, when they began the process of creating the narrative about, a progressive DA is bad, restorative justice is bad, soft on crime narrative. They brought that back from the 1970s. Yeah. So they've been very organized and effective at deceiving the public into thinking that these things are bad.
Just cheaper anyway. Lies are cheaper. They're easier to do, and they're cheaper.